All right, welcome to Chat with a Grad. I'm Carrie Bonfito. I'm the culinary program manager, and we're joined by one of our graduates today who went to the Berkeley campus. And we're so excited to welcome Carrie Jones, who is in London. And Carrie is a food educator, a food writer, just you've made your career around food. And we're so excited to talk to you today about your new cookbook and how you've been using your culinary education. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. It was 11 years ago I left Bauman, so it's so nice to sort of come back and connect and tell you about all the things I've been doing in that time.
Yeah, so what do you want to give us a little bit of a timeline? Like you graduated, and then what was the thing you started with first?
So I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do going into Bowman, and actually I had this kind of like penny drop moment during one of my externships when I was helping Chef Lizette at a cookery school in Lafayette that she was working at, and I was like, oh, I loved the idea of working with people and teaching them much more than I knew that I didn't really want to do chef work. And I knew I'd always wanted to do food writing as well. So it was like, this could be a really good way of me building my career. But when I got back to London, I was like, I need to earn money. I need to have a job. And I was determined not to go back to my old career. So I worked in a cafe for about 9 months of that first year. It was a cafe that was like attached to a yoga studio. So that felt really kind of like nice and California vibes. And that was the time in London when all the yoga studios started opening. And yeah, I didn't enjoy it very much. It was quite hard work. And quite solitary. I was the only chef. So yeah, we moved on from then, and I got into doing lots of community cookery classes. There's various programs and schemes around London. I got involved in that. At the same time, I was blogging and writing recipes. And then yeah, I've just had a very slow like transition. So I work now at a place called the Garden Museum, which is a museum all about gardens and gardening, which is based right in central London. And we've got a little cookery studio there. So I work as part of the learning team as a food educator. And I've been doing that for the last 8 years on a part-time basis alongside all my freelance stuff. So I feel like that's kind of really, I've sort of honed myself into that kind of like food educator role. And I still absolutely love it. So that's great.
So wow, that sounds really cool. So if I could just go back to like the food blogging and the food writing, did you have a background in journalism or anything, or did you just kind of jump in and start putting out a blog?
Yeah, no, not at all. And actually, the hilarious thing is like my exams that I did when I was 16 at school, they're called GCSEs in England. Like English was my worst subject. I was much more interested in maths and music and like, you know, so kind of creative things. I wasn't that great at English. So I've had to work really hard. So it wasn't until I started a blog about training for the marathon. This is way pre-Bowman. And I realized I actually really liked writing. And I think I'd been put off writing all that time because I thought I wasn't very good at it. Obviously, as an adult, and you know, use words to communicate in work all the time, and that gave me quite a lot of confidence in my writing and my abilities. And I loved writing the marathon blog. And then when I did the marathon, I was like, I'm not going to run anymore. My friend said, oh, why don't you start a food blog, because you're really passionate about good food and healthy food. And at the same time, I did a short course in nutrition, and it sort of kind of all fit together. And then I just started writing recipes and realized that I loved creating things. So that was about 2011. That was about 2 years before Bowman. So I got really into that, and then realized I liked doing that more than my job. That was where the whole like transition to change came from, really. So, and I, you know, kept up keeping that online platform the entire time. It's really important part of what I do is to keep sharing online, to keep your profile up, even though it's a lot of work and you don't really get paid for it either. But that's how it works. So that's how you get book deals. You have to just keep plugging away.
Sure. And then you're doing the blog, and there's definitely the words, but then there's also the visual part of the blog. So are you also, were you training in food photography? Or were you just taking pictures and pictures and pictures and you're like, that one's good. Okay. And now I know how to do this. Like, how were you doing the visuals for the
Yeah,
blog?
so when I started the blog, this was like pre-iPhone life, which is crazy to think about it. So nobody had good cameras in their hands. You had to buy a camera, and I was really resistant to like buying a DSLR and learning how to do it. I was like, no, it's the recipes. And then the way that the visuals just overtook the internet, you kind of had to. So I went and did a couple of short courses in food photography, got a DSLR, and really learned how to use it. And it went from there, and then actually discovered that I've got quite a good eye for styling and making things look nice. And that's kind of, as a chef, as a trained chef, you know, you learn how to style your food anyway. So then it's just putting the visuals on top of that and making sure it's in the right bowl and on the right background. And now that everyone's got iPhones, people don't use DSLRs so much, but I still get mine out if I'm creating something for a website, because I think it's really important to show the food off in its best light. But just for Instagram on a daily basis, obviously just use my iPhone. So yeah, I was quite resistant to learning how to do that, but I'm so glad that I did, because I think it was a really important part of sharing and writing online and showing your food in the best light by photographing it in a beautiful way.
Wonderful. Well, we'll get to see some of your photos a little bit later, but so timeline wise, so you were doing the blogging, you kind of decided to come to Bauman and
Yeah.
get more culinary education.
Yeah.
And then you said you got a job as a food educator. Was that the next step?
So no, I worked in a cafe to start with, and then on the back of working for the cafe, I started chefing for yoga retreats. And you know, I did yoga myself, and I'd been on a couple of retreats. That felt like a really natural progression from what I'd learned in the cafe, as well as obviously what I'd learned on my training. And then that was the main chef work I was doing, sort of maybe 1 or 2 weekends a month for those first couple of years, and that gave me so much experience. And then I started getting asked to, you know, go to France for a week and Italy for a week, and that was a steep learning curve, shall we say. And I kind of stopped doing retreats so much. Obviously, when COVID hit, everything went. And then I kind of sort of thought, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm in my 40s now. Like, I don't have the same energy for 14-hour days on my feet in the kitchen that I did when I was maybe in my 30s 10 years ago. So I've made a decision not to do so many now. Like, I might do 1 or 2 a year if it's a client I really want to work with. But yeah, the retreats has run alongside that kind of like 10-year period. The food education has as well, as does the food writing. So it kind of like, you know, concertina's in and out depending on what work I get offered. But my wish would just be to do food educating and food writing. But it's quite hard to earn a living as a food writer. So that's difficult, but I'm trying.
And so you were working at the Garden Museum, is that?
Yeah.
And what do you do? Like, what we say food educator, right? And there's so many different ways to teach people about food. So what are you doing for the Garden Museum?
So our program, which I was the first person to take on the role, it was a new role after the building was renovated, and they built a cooking studio as part of as well as like a classroom for plant science and biology. So I could shape it in any way that I wanted to, really kind of like within the realms of the job description. So we just decided to make it hands-on cookery based, because that's what I'd say my expertise is in. And so I work with a range of ages. So we're just about to start our summer holiday program I do a strand for kids aged 5 to 8 whose parents come as well. And then a strand for kids aged 9 to 13. And then I'm doing a project with teenagers where they do gardening and cooking at the same time, which not literally at the same time, but on the same day. And then in term time, I run various community projects. So I'm currently just about to finish a 6-week project done in conjunction with our local doctor's surgery, where people are recommended to come. And we just have a nice time cooking. If usually people are sent for like just to boost their mental health more than anything, really, to have that enjoyment of cooking with other people. And then I run classes for the public as well. And we try and bring kind of botanical themes in, or do world cooking. But the emphasis is on like what we call here like a cook and eat session. So you cook and then you sit down and enjoy a meal together. And, you know, most of the time, I'd say like 95% of the time, the emphasis is on the food being really healthy, and for people to be able to take that away and then replicate in their own homes.
And so the garden is growing the food. So are you using a lot of produce that's grown on site? Because that can be a really
Sadly
like, oh, you're not.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, because we're right bang in the middle of central London, right on the Thames, next door to Lambeth Palace, which is where like the head of the UK church lives. It's a very historic part of the town, but we don't have much outside space there. We've got a little bit. We do grow a little bit in a community garden in a park around the corner, but for the most part, I have to buy the food in, which is a shame, but that's just central London for you. We just don't have the space. Yeah, but lots of people in London don't have their own gardens. So to be able to bring them into our environment where we celebrate gardens and plants is like a really nice thing. And that's why they decided to set up this museum in central London rather than in the countryside, because, you know, everyone in the countryside has their own gardens. So, yeah. Wonderful. I haven't got a garden, so.
It's hard to have space, right? And it's a lot of work. So yeah. On top of, I always feel like you should partner with somebody who has a garden, and then they can grow and you can cook, because doing both is a lot. So what now, this, I think everybody really wants to know about the cookbook deal, and what is the name of your book? Like, what is the book about, and how did that all come about? Okay, let's see.
Obviously, proof of this. So my book's called It Starts With Veg, 100 Seasonal Suppers and Sides. So it's got 100 recipes in it. And the title came way after I'd finished writing it. So it's hard to say that was the inspiration for it, but what the book is about is very much about it starting with veg. And the title sort of is like, if you've got a tomato, for example, and you don't know what to do with it, you build your recipe around a tomato, right? So you'd think about, oh, I really like to slow roast my tomatoes, and then the recipe would be based around slow roasted tomatoes. The whole point is each of the recipes that I've devised have started with veg, as the veg is the starting point. And it covers 40 different vegetables. Most are UK-based seasonal produce. I try to veer off from doing anything like tropical, because we don't really have access to that there. So the emphasis is on supporting seasonal and local. You probably have more choice of that in California than we do in the UK. But yeah, 40 different vegetables. I originally wanted to write a book about 100 different fruit and veg, but my publishers went for the 40 vegetables instead. So that's what we did. So there's a little introduction to each vegetable at the start of each section. It's in chapters of like families. So you have like summer vegetables, mushrooms, leaves, brassicas, that kind of thing. So like each vegetable has its own little introduction page where all the different varieties you might find, the best ways to prepare them, things that they might go with, and then some recipe ideas, and then it moves on to the recipes. So yeah, the whole seasonal local vibe was very much something I learned at Bauman. So it's a nice credit to that.
I'm dropping your link from your website to your cookbook in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, but everybody on has access to that now, because it is really a beautiful, just vibrant color, right? And it's full of those illustrations, like you said. But were you were food blogging? Like, were you looking for a cookbook project? Did you just start writing this on your own, or how were you pitching? What was the whole process like for you?
Yes, it's something I'd always wanted to do. When I was sitting at my desk job pre-leaving to go to Bauman, when I was getting frustrated and bored, and I just want to leave and run away and write a cookbook. So it'd always been a dream of mine, not since I was a kid, but since I got into food. And I'd had my eyes wide open to the industry for a really long time. I'd been connecting with lots of different people. So I kind of understood the process and I'd learned a lot before I got anywhere near creating it myself. And I was always aware that I kind of needed to learn more and feel more confident in what my style of writing and recipes was before I got the book deal. And I think if I'd written a book in like 10 years ago, I felt like I was ready then. And I think if I'd have written a book then, it would have been a very different book to what I created now. And I think ultimately what I've created now is way better. So everything happens for a reason. But sort of the 2017-18 era, I was due to meet with an agent. I'd written a very short proposal, and then they decided that I didn't have enough social media followers. So that got canned. And then I kind of went away for a few years and was like, okay, I need to work on this a bit more, but also I need to come back with a really, really strong idea. She obviously wasn't the right agent for me. And I was really struggling to come up with a theme that felt like I could sell that. It's like, these are my recipes. I cook seasonal food and it's beautiful and delicious. But how do you turn that into a cookbook that a publisher will want to take on and sell? And I belong to a network in the UK called the Guild of Food Writers. And I applied to their mentorship program, and I got a mentor who was an 80-year-old lady who specialized in olive oil and has written about 30 books over her career. So she didn't, you know, she wasn't talking about all the modern day cookbooks, but she had that real experience of you know, how to put a cookbook proposal together. And I spoke to her every month for about 6 months. This was during 2021, so we're still in COVID era then. And I very slowly wrote a proposal, which is basically an outline of what you're going to put in the book and how you're going to sell the book. So how you're best placed to write the book and how you're best placed to sell the book, as well as all the content. So an idea of what all 100 recipes are going to be, what the structure is, what your platform is, and then some examples of recipes in there. And I included some photographs as well. And then you have to start sending that off. So in the UK, you generally send that to an agent. And then an agent, if they decide to take it on, will then take it out to the publishers. I tried that. I got quite a lot of no's and quite a lot of no replies, which is really normal. And I was told that that was what would happen. And then I was put in direct contact with a commissioning editor through a colleague who wrote about gardening and plants, so not about food, but that publishing company created lifestyle books, and they liked my idea and then took it on from then. So I was actually quite lucky that sending it out to proposal and then getting somebody interested only took a couple of months. Between them being initially interested and then me signing the contract was another 6 months, very, very slow, because everything is just slow because they're so busy. And then you get given about a year to write it, and then you go from there. So I'm now at the point where I would like to write a second book, and my current publishers have told me that they don't want to do a second book with me, so I'm going to have to start that whole process all over again. So yeah, great.
Well, that's it. That's very interesting, right? So that process of, like you said, the networking, the joining the guild, the really understanding what should go into that proposal. Can you tell us, like, what you said? This wasn't It Starts with Veg was not the original title. What was? Do you have a working title that was on your proposal?
Yeah, mine was What the Veg, like what the hell, what the veg. I just, because the sort of what is it, what the veg. And I felt like that was very much my sense of humor, but they just didn't get it, obviously. They didn't like that. They wanted something else. And we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then one random afternoon, I was walking around London off to meet a friend or something like that. And it suddenly just popped into my head. I was like, I think that kind of like describes what the book's about. But also for me, starting with veg in terms of like health is like a really nice message. And whilst I didn't really talk about that in the book because I didn't want to start going into nutrition, I just wanted to celebrate vegetables and celebrate my recipes. And for me, that it kind of like, it just feels like that completely sits with who I am and what I want to share with the world. So yeah.
I love that. So I'm going to actually open it up because I have a lot of questions, but I'm sure you do as well. So I want to open it up to our audience. Does anyone have any questions so far? Michelle.
Of course I do. I've got lots of questions. I'm curious, how long do you think that it took you to write it? So like kind of like from proposal to end, how long did it take you to at least get that first draft? And then I'm sure there's like a whole other process of when it goes through editing.
So I got offered the book in July, and I was told that my deadline was the beginning of June the next year. So I was kind of given 11 months to produce the text for the cookbook, test all the recipes, do absolutely everything, hand it in. And we didn't end up signing the contract until the end of September because there was lots of toing and froing and going back and forth and this, that, and the other, all of which I don't know why I bothered, because they said no to everything that I asked them to change. So that took a lot of time. And then I just moved house to where I am now, and I'd inherited an oven that didn't work. So I was like, right, I'm going to renovate the kitchen. Had to wait for my mortgage payment to come through to pay for that. So that was like November. And then I got COVID for the first time. This was the end of 2021. And I lost my sense of taste for about 2 weeks. And I was like, why is this happening now? So I didn't really start aggressively testing until like the end of December. And then I knew that the 1st of June deadline wasn't going to happen. So I had a month extension. So I wrote the whole thing in like 7 months. Obviously, I'd done a lot of work beforehand, and I knew the structure. I had a vague idea of what all my recipes were going to be. Next time I do a book, and there will be a next time, I would have started that process much earlier. And even when I didn't have an oven, I could have done so much work then, but I didn't want to, because I felt like I wanted to start the recipes, and then I'd have a bit more, didn't really know how I was going to write it. You don't really, until you kind of like have to write it, it's very difficult to start putting stuff down on paper. The recipes it's functional. You have an idea for a recipe, you take it into the kitchen, you test it, you write it up, you test it again, you make adjustments. That bit wasn't difficult. It just felt like a marathon, because hundreds, a lot to do. But all the introductions that I had to do that were like at least 500 words on each vegetable, it's like times 40. Okay, that's quite a lot of words. So or was it 1,500 words? Anyway, it was quite a lot of words on each vegetable. So yeah, I wish I could have done all of that before I started cooking. But until you get into the kitchen and start playing with everything, you kind of don't really know what you want to say about it. So yeah, that only comes with experience, I think. And your first book is always going to be, oh, I could have done that better. But yeah, from handing it in, it was then a whole year before it came out. And we signed it off for print in the December. And then I don't know what happens in that last 6 months, because they printed it in the UK. So it didn't have to come on a ship from China. It just, that was just their schedule. So, and the editing process wasn't too bad. I didn't have a photo shoot. There's no photos in the book. So that often takes a big chunk of time. And there's often some tweaking to recipes after the photo shoots, because you cook them again in a different format. So yeah, the editing wasn't too bad. We went back and forth with the editor and checking this, that, and the other. And then when they lay out on the pages, they have to cut bits of writing out to make it fit, but just making sure my editor was great at that. So yeah. And I was working at the same time as doing all of this, my job. So I had to keep taking the odd day annual leave, but I still managed to do a full program of events that year and write a book. I'm not quite sure how I did it. I didn't go to the gym. I didn't do any exercise. Now I realise I've got much back. My healthy lifestyle is back with me again now. Now I realise I should have been doing that, because it would have made my brain work a bit better, and for the writing and everything. But you know, again, you learn, don't you? I haven't got time to go to the gym. I haven't got time to do any exercise. But I did. I just didn't focus on it. So yeah, you learn.
Wonderful. Emily.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is so fascinating. And I got a copy of the book, your cookbook, last year, and I love it. I mean, it's so beautiful. And I actually really like the fact that there aren't pictures. I think there's a piece in is it Samin's book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, where she talks, but she also chose not to put pictures in, because she doesn't want to have this, expectation of perfectionism for people, where it's really about the taste. And I think there's something really accessible about that and beautiful. Yeah, and I'm thinking about this really awesome lasagna from the book that I'm going to have to make again one of these days. But my question was, and you already touched on this a little bit, but what was the recipe testing process like? Like, how long are you testing each one? Do you have other people involved in the testing? Like, how are you kind of going through that process to get to your final recipes?
Yeah, and again, there's no template for this, so no one tells you what to do or how to do it. I was like, where's my instruction manual for how to write a book? There wasn't one. And obviously I've been writing and producing my own recipes for a long time, so I know what I'm doing and I know how to write a recipe. So I would generally write the recipe first usually on Google Docs, whatever it was I was working on, go out and buy the ingredients, come home and test it, write notes as I'm doing. So, you're looking for, does this taste good? You're checking, have you got the right portion size? And everything else that you'd want to put in a recipe. Quite a lot of the recipes were recipes that I'd been cooking like on retreats or in my cookery classes. So they needed a test to make sure that they were right for the portion size. But I knew I wasn't going to change the flavour too much. And maybe they had one, maybe a double check. A couple of other recipes, like I came up with the idea for doing a celeriac chowder instead of like your standard potato one. And on about the 5th attempt, I was like losing the will to live. Because I was trying to do it with milk and the milk kept splitting, and I was like, everyone online seems like this is not the first time this has been done. So then I had to rethink how am I going to do this without so then I changed it. I didn't use milk, I used a little bit of cream and mostly stock, and that was a nice way of doing it. So and then once I tested them all, I asked all my friends and family and colleagues if they were interested in testing a recipe. And I don't know, about 30 people said they would. So then I sent them a recipe and I was like, I don't care what you think of it artistically. What I want to know is like, are my timings right? Is this an achievable recipe? Does what I've written make sense to you? If you don't like it, I don't care, because I know I like it. And some people were really judgmental, and I was like, oh, okay. And then they'd send that. I did a little Google form so people could send me some so I could collate all the feedback in a very organized way. And it's been really interesting, because since then I volunteered to test recipes for other people's books every now and again when like a request comes through, and the network I'm in. And not everyone is as organized as me with their approach or asked as many questions. So I think I did an okay job. But yeah, there's no money to pay a professional tester, and I couldn't afford to pay anyone or pay them for their ingredients. It was all done on goodwill. And like one of my friends tested like 10 of them, which was incredible. So, but yeah, what you're generally looking for is that it works, basically. That's what I want to know, rather than do they think it could include another spice or something like that. I feel like that was the decision I'd already made myself.
Lovely. Georgia, what's your question?
Hey, so my question is, well, I'm super excited to find your cookbook, partially because of the visuals. I love that. It just, the eyesight first. But my question is actually more about how you got started with the gardening and the cooking with the kids, because that is a big vision of mine that I would like to do in my community, or maybe we can get that going all over the world. So yeah.
Yeah, so I don't do any of the gardening. I love the idea of gardening. And once upon a time, I was going to go, and at some point in the last few years, I thought I'd go and do a gardening qualification and learn how to do it. And then I got offered the book, and then life took a different direction. So I'm very lucky that I am in a paid job on a permanent contract that is funded through a trust in the UK for us to create this program. So we don't have to worry about covering costs. So, our kids' classes are like £5. I don't know what that is in dollars these days. And our community stuff we do is free, but that's why the trust give us money in order to create these experiences for people. So yeah, I've been very lucky to just be given that template to go and work with. I think if you want to then create a project yourself, it's a bit more difficult. You might need to find funding in order to pay for that. And, whether you've got the space to do the gardening and the cooking and all of that. But I was very much inspired. Like my last day in Berkeley, I went to the Edible Schoolyard project to go and have a tour. I'd had it in the back of my mind, like the Airbnb I stayed in when I arrived in Berkeley was around the corner from there. And I'd had the idea of like, this project's amazing. And now we've got a very similar project in Hackney in London in the UK, where they've got a cookery school on site that's shared between 3 schools. And it's incredible seeing that. So I don't know if you have access to other projects that already exist to go and visit them or get experience working with them, see how they do it, and then create, a similar model. Things can be done on quite a small budget, I would say. I think for our budget, the thing that costs the most money is labour. So when I work alongside a gardener, we need enough money to pay the gardener, because I'm already paid for, and then ingredients cost and seeds and soil and everything, but that's not too bad. It's usually paying for somebody's labour that costs the most there. But there's lots of things you can do, like, so with this week-long project we're doing in August, you can't really do sow to eating because it's a week. So they'll be doing things like micro herbs or learning how to pot stuff, so that they can then go and take that We've done the project before. We did it over the one day a month over the course of a year, which is incredible because then you can see everything grow, and then cook it at the end, which is such a nice thing to do. Like cooking potatoes with kids who've grown the potatoes, and they taste amazing, and kind of like making that connection between what you grow and what you eat.
I think that's great advice. Like, looking, because there's so many grants out there. Especially for cooking for kids and doing nutrition classes for kids, which a lot of times people will have money for that, and that you can say, oh, and we're going to do a cooking component, and that will put your proposal at the top if you're not just talking, if you're feeding.
And take lots of photos if you do get like a pilot project, like document everything, because it makes it so much easier to go back and ask for more funding if you've got proof of what you created, and getting feedback and quotes from people and all of that stuff. Yeah, we have a development team that put that all together, but they're always making sure I need to collect all that information so that we can use it for future funding reports and things.
Wonderful. I know Maritza has a question.
Yes, hi, Ceri.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing all your experience and all your process. I'm on a different device and I could not find my raise the hand. So anyways, I'd like to know, how do you, like, how much time on your teaching part in the museum, how long do you have to, do you allocate for each class? And when you say complete menus, do you do like an entree and then on an appetizer, or do you do dessert, or like how do you structure that, and how long does it take you to do the whole class?
Okay, so it depends on who I'm working with. So yesterday I had a adult community class. It was a two-hour class including eating. I think we ran slightly over because they talk a lot, these people. And they always want to do desserts, and I'm like, we're not here for desserts. That's like, I'm meant to be teaching you to eat healthy food. So we made like a pad thai and some Vietnamese rice wraps and a smashed cucumber salad. So I usually try and do like a main and a side. And my public classes, we usually do a main and a side and a dessert. With the kids' classes, it depends on the format of the class, but again, it's usually about 2 hours. Okay. And some of the younger kids, like 2 hours is quite long. Like we might have a break in the middle, or it feels more like an hour and 45. But I usually leave a big chunk of that time for eating, because I think sitting and eating together is a really important part of the cooking process, because that's where the magic happens, especially if it's stuff that they thought they didn't want to eat at the beginning of the class. Yeah, and you can often concertina stuff to, like, do 2 recipes and make it last a lot longer if you do a lot of talking. It depends on how much chopping there is involved. Yeah, but usually 3 recipes maybe, if they're not too long. I do run longer master classes, and now you might do a few more, and that would be about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. That's a bit more exhausting though. And then you might look at the starter, main and dessert, but for the most of them, usually two courses, I'd say.
And do people each have their own things to cut, or do you do for stations, or like how do you organize everyone to work on the recipes?
So the way that our room is set up is it's not small, but there's room for 6, 7, 8 people to cook, and we do that around a central table. So everyone has their own station of where they will chop, but everyone doesn't do their own recipe. So we cook together. So we're making vegetables, and I'm like, you can cut that, you can cut that, you can cut that. We will go over to the stove and throw it in, or I might get 2 people to do one recipe, 2 to do another. I do it different every time. It depends on how I need to fit everything in and get it all done. But I have been to cooking schools, even in London, where you all have your own station and it's all pre-prepared for you, and you chop, and then you have your own thing to do it. And that's great for giving people confidence. But I feel like bringing people together in a nice warm environment, kind of cooking together, and that's where we chat and have our nice conversations, and that is how you get enjoyment, and it's a very nice relaxed environment rather than being stressful and with a chef looking at you how you're chopping. And I think one of the first community cookery schools I worked in London way back when, like, that was how they set up their classes. That's kind of like something I've always known, and that format always works for me.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. And then one other question for how many social media followers were your publishers wanted you to have before even considering you to publish your book?
So mine didn't ask for a certain amount. I think I had about 8,000 on Instagram at the time of them accepting my proposal, and I've still not got 10,000. I'm still like about nine and a bit. Not all publishers are bothered by that. Some are. I think they're all quite interested in what your network is and how you're going to sell the book. So for me, because I work at a place with quite a good reputation in London, that was a big tick box for me. And because of all the work that I do in the community and the retreats and meeting people, I'm out there. I'm not just in my own house writing on the internet. Like, I'm out there meeting people all the time. I think was one of the reasons why I did. But I know people who've got like nearly 1 million Instagram followers, and that doesn't mean to say that they're going to sell 1 million more books than I have. So not all publishers will be really bothered about the exact amount. You need to show that you've got a platform and that there's an interest for what you've got to share. And that takes a lot of time and energy to build that up. And that you've got a voice, that people are listening to what you've got to say. And it's really good practice sharing recipes with the world on all those platforms to get feedback in order to prove that, you've got a cookbook in you. But equally, people come out of nowhere with no following and write books, and they're very successful. So there's no set template these days.
All right. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sharon Love.
I think you're muted still.
Oh, thank you. So back to the question, like, I guess in connection to Maritza's question, besides the followers and whatnot. So I heard that you had the first publisher, and that first publisher was the one that says, no, you don't have enough followers, then took off. And then you found the second the second publisher that did not care if you have any follower. My question is finding a publisher in connection to you being a part of the Writers Guild in UK, or how did you get your name out there? How did you find a publisher per se?
Okay, so the first person who turned me down was an agent rather than a publisher. So it's a slightly different part of the market. I've lost my train of thought. It's like 9:30 for me, so my brain's been going a long time today. I just establishing a platform, I'd say. So of all the things that I'd ticked off the box that I'd worked, I've been on the internet sharing recipes since 2011. I've been writing a newsletter every month, not quite since then, but a lot of the time. Like, I've been working, having freelance work, people paying me to cook for them, teaching cookery classes that we sell tickets to and people buy them. It's having all of those things as part of your name, as well as sharing everything on your platform. It's an insane amount of work just to be able to get someone to publish you a book that you don't really earn very much money from. And I knew that putting all of that work in to write a book was not going to earn me money, but it was something that I really, really wanted to do. So I think you have to be aware that writing books doesn't necessarily, it does for the lucky few, but it doesn't necessarily earn you a living. It can be part of that whole package of what you share. So for me now, I'm a published writer. It's part of my whole package of selling cookery classes and doing little bits of chef work and teaching and trying to get more writing gigs. I thought it'd be easier to get writing gigs now that I've got a book, but it hasn't been thus far. So it's a very difficult climate at the moment, but I'm trying really hard. So yeah. Does that answer your question? Yes, it's all about platform and authority, I think they say. Yeah.
Wonderful. Rain has a question
as well, but that just puts you in touch with a billion other people who are all trying to do the same thing as you, but they're not there to give you a leg up or anything like that. It's just great to have a network of other people doing similar things. Like, this is a network, so that you're not alone on that journey. Because I moved into food knowing no one. It was this mad pipe dream that I had. Didn't know anyone. So yeah, you need those networks in order to help build on. I've got a massive network now of friends and people in the industry, and we can all share our woes together, and that's really helpful. So
Rain, what's your question?
Yeah, congratulations, Chef Ceri. Am I pronouncing your name right?
it's Ceri.
Ceri, thank you. I was wondering, congratulations on the book. I noticed that the recipes, they seem like they really bridge deep nutrient density with comfort food. And that's what I'm seeing. And it was really nice to see some of those. My question is, when you do some of your events, whether they're wellness or children or whatever you do, how do you manage bringing in support in order for you to direct, cook, and yeah, just how do you bring in support? Do you bring in an assistant or two or three? Are they people that you already know and have established, or how do you do that?
That's a very good question. So in my years of running retreats, I did most of them on my own. There was always like a threshold of a number of guests, and when it sort of went over 14, 15, I'm like, nope, need help. So I'd make sure I built that into my budget that I could pay for someone. And then usually I'd had a network of somebody who'd been in touch with me and said, I want some experience on a retreat, can I come and help you? And then I'd pay them a basic fee in order to help me out. The last one I did was a small one, so did it on my own. The one I did previously to that was actually somebody who I went to school with who wanted to get into food. So she came and spent 3 days with me in the kitchen, and I paid her for that. I think if I did retreats more often, I'd have a big network of assistant chefs to come and help me. And then in terms of the teaching, I do most of it on my own. Occasionally we have a volunteer who is part of the museum volunteer network who comes and helps run a session, or someone might go and get in contact and say they wanted to observe a class. And I'm like, great, you can come and assist me. But I only have 6 people in a class. I've got used to doing that on my own. In our community classes, everybody kind of gets involved with the washing up. And then in our family classes, the parents are there. Or sometimes I spend an hour and a half, 2 hours after the class clearing up, and the kitchen is a complete bomb site while I'm teaching. But there's not much I can do about that. But yeah, there's usually someone who, yeah, the last masterclass I did actually, which I always get an assistant if it's a masterclass, because if people have paid a big amount of money to come, I don't want the kitchen to be chaos, was somebody who I'd taught previously about 7 or 8 years ago. Had got back in touch, was like, oh, I'd love to come and assist you and find out, what you do. And I was like, great, come along. And I do like to pay people wherever possible, because I think that's really important. So yeah, we make sure I make room for that in the budget.
Great question. Thank you. Emily.
Yes, I was thinking about how you said you have plans for another cookbook that you want to write. Now, unless it's a secret, maybe you don't want to talk about it yet, but do you have a vision for kind of your focus of the next one?
No, that's why I keep putting it off. I think having been through the process once, I know how much work it is. So I think I'm procrastinating against that at the moment. And I've got a couple of ideas of what I'd like to write about and how I'd like to support my recipes, but I know I need to sit down, do the hard work and flesh out an idea and says, is there enough room for this? And so every time I think I've thought a unique idea, like somebody else announces their new book that's the exact thing that I was going to write about. So it's really hard to be unique. But I also see books produced all the time that are direct copies of something else someone did a year ago. So I don't know how important that is. But for me, the year that my book came out, at least another 4 or 5 recipe books about vegetables came out that same year. And there were some the previous years. But I felt like last year was a real big vegetable cookbook year. And they were all done by independent, different publishers. So no one would have known that everybody else was going to choose that subject for their book. So I was bang on trend. It was just really annoying. Like, I know I'm not unique anymore because everyone's had the same idea. And I think that you can't prevent that from happening. That's always going to happen. And I don't think there are any I don't think there's a book that hasn't been written these days. There is so, and frequently go into bookshops and have a look and just see the breadth of the cookbooks that are being created all the time. And I don't think there's anything unique, but the only thing that is unique is your voice and what you'd share. And I know that my recipes would be different and the way that I tell the story would be different. It's just making sure that it's a, what's the word? like it needs to be a profitable idea, it needs to have legs, or a publisher's never going to take it on. So kind of making sure that it's commercial, that's the word. Yeah.
And Michelle, I'll get to your question too, but I wanted to just drop in your Substack into the chat as well here, so that everybody can see that what you're working on now, and ask you if there's anything on your website that you wanted me to highlight in particular with any of the recipes or the visuals. Maybe I'll just share, as Michelle's asking her question, some of the beautiful, beautiful photos.
Okay, well, now that I know you're on Substack, I have another question. I have two questions. My first question is, for a first-time cookbook author wannabe, and also if for your second time around, are you going to have a certain percentage, or would you recommend a certain percentage of the recipes, like once you have an idea for your proposal, to kind of have it complete? Would that make it easier?
I mean, it would save you time in the long run, but I think with my publishers, they had like a guidelines of how you write recipes. So you needed to write them in their format. So that meant standardizing. You know, I had to do it in kilograms and ounces, because the book was being simultaneously released in the US. And they had a very much like, it's this way you do the steps, and different publishers might have a slightly different like in-house style guidelines. She'd probably still need to do a lot of editing work afterwards.
Okay.
I think I had 10 recipes in my original proposal.
Okay.
That were fully written out, and I know that I retested all of those when I came to put them in the book and tweaked them again. So yeah, because that's what you do, right? You perfect everything every time you cook it. You go, oh, maybe I'll just do that little extra bit, that little extra bit. So yeah, you don't need to have done all, well, not all cookbooks have 100 recipes. I regretted my decision on that when I finished 80. I was like, could have been done now. I'd say like 10% is really good. And if you don't end up using them in the proposal, you can use them elsewhere. Some of the ones that didn't go into the book, I recycled and have put on my website by tweaking them a little bit and changing them, and no one ever knew that. So yeah.
Perfect. And then coming from someone who has a WordPress site but was also considering Substack, are you monetized with tiers on Substack? So are you earning money that way as well? Or do you have a website and a Substack?
Yeah, I have both. And the Guild of Food Writers ran an introduction to Substack, I don't know, like about a year ago. And I was so in the depths of writing and finishing my book that I was like, I can't think about it. And I was writing a monthly newsletter anyway. So the way that I decided to make my Substack was just to make it like my monthly newsletter that I'd always been writing. So I already had the format for how I structured that. And I thought I'd do it for at least 6 months before I decided whether to monetize. Which lots of people say you should monetize straight away. And I have been doing it for 6 months now, and I'm still not sure I want to, because I think if you're going to monetize your Substack, you need to do a weekly post. And I don't have time for that, because I know I only work 3 days a week, but I don't know where the other 2 days go in admin and planning and, you know, pitching and other stuff and creating content for Instagram. I don't have that stress of having to do a new recipe every single week. I think you need more than 2 days to do that. So I've decided not to monetize it for now and just see how things go. And the idea was to keep everything on my website, all the recipes, new recipes on my website. So that keeps there as a like for longevity. However, my website currently needs fixing, and it's going to cost loads of money.
It's never ending. It's never ending.
There's too much on it basically, and the hosting package is not working anymore. So I've shelved that because I don't know how to solve it. But Substack can be used in loads of different ways. Like, it essentially is just blogging, and I'm like, I did that 14 years ago. And some food writers who've never blogged, they've just written books and are now going, oh, I can just write what I want. And I'm like, yeah, I've been doing that forever. So for me, I'm using it as a summary of, this is what, you know, like a magazine style article about what I'm cooking this month and what events I've got coming up. And here's some recipes on theme that you don't really do on a, you don't really have do that on blog. And it's another way to create a platform that gives you a level of authority in the same way that any of the social media one does. And now everyone has a Substack. Well, it feels like they do here. So it's just, I have not invested time in interacting with other writers and pigging back onto commenting on there because I haven't got time for it. But I'm, it's like writing a newsletter, but in a way that everyone can see it. So, and I did my last one last week, and that's my 6th one. And I got more followers this week, more people commenting and liking it than I have done before. So I feel like it's quite a slow burner. I know people who monetized it. Have told me it's quite stressful having to produce all of that outcome, all of that information all the time. But everyone's really cagey, and no one's told me how much. I want to know what your figures, like how much you're bringing home each month compared to how much time you're spending on it. Is it better to go out and get other work?
Good point. Thank you.
This has been so interesting, fascinating. I think it's just kind of got my wheels turning. I hope that students have their wheels turning too, about just, building yourself as an authority, right? I think is really what I've taken away today, is that just it takes time, it takes patience, and it just takes that passion that you really seem to have to do this and create these recipes and share them with so many different people in your life, which I think is the beautiful part of what you're doing. Looking at all of those recipes on your website is just like the photos are stunning, and I'm like everyone. I was like, ooh. I want to try that one. I want to try that one. So I might have my menu planned for the next couple of weeks here already. So thank you very much for sharing what you're doing and what you're cooking with us.
You're welcome.
And we would love to have you come back and talk to us about anything that you're doing in the future as well.
Fantastic.
Emily.
I do have a final question, because we do ask this at orientation and it feels appropriate. During introductions, when people are introducing themselves, they always say what their favorite vegetable is. And I'm going to guess that's probably quite a difficult question for you to answer, but I know a lot of people will also kind of change based upon the season and what they're currently eating. So would you humor me and let us know what your current favorite veggie is?
So I got asked this once. I had like one radio interview in the BBC when my book came out, which was really scary. I had to go to like the broadcasting house and having it in person with like a minor celebrity doing the questioning. And I was like, I don't know, I don't have one. This week, I've been eating loads of tomatoes because I was gifted a massive box of tomatoes from a UK producer, presumably so I can promote them on my Instagram. They didn't pay me for that. And yeah, so I love tomatoes. I think, especially when they're in season, which they are now here, and they're absolutely delicious. And there's nothing quite like a really good, juicy, sweet tomato that you don't actually even have to cook. You can just eat it like it is. Yeah, they're in my mind because I'm eating them a lot. But it's a vegetable that you could eat. I know it's technically a fruit, but anyway. You can eat it as it is. You don't actually need to do anything to it. It's not like a potato that needs some attention and cooking. So I think tomato can be, accessible point for anyone.
Wonderful. Well, do you have any questions for us before we part our ways today?
I don't know. I don't know. Does anyone here want to write a book? Yeah, everyone always wants to write a book, don't they? Yeah, go for it.
Well, thank you so much for your advice and your time. We really, really, really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody being here. We will have this up on our YouTube channel. So if you're talking to any of your peers, let them know that it's definitely worth tuning in for. All right.
Fantastic. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bed now.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Hi, thank you so much, Chef.